As we walked out of the airport, the media crowded around the two leaders and shouted questions about the Archbishop's trip. The Archbishop stopped to answer and to use the attention of the media to shine a spotlight on injustice. He spoke as the clicks of cameras peppered his comments. I am so glad to be with my dear friends. Often things and people try to keep us apart, but the love that we have for each other and the goodness of God's universe ensures that we shall meet. The first time that the South African government refused him a visa, when he was going to come to my 80th birthday, I asked him, how many divisions do you have in your army? Why is China scared of you? And that is what surprises me. Maybe they are right. A spiritual leader is something that should be taken very seriously. We hope that God's world will become a better place, more hospitable to goodness, more hospitable to compassion, more hospitable to generosity, more hospitable to living together so we don't have what is happening now between Russia and the Ukraine, or what is happening with ISIS, or what is happening in Kenya or Syria. They make God weep. The Archbishop turned to leave, but then paused again as another journalist asked about the purpose of his trip. We are together just to enjoy our friendship and to talk about joy. The Archbishop and the Dalai Lama were whisked away by a waiting motorcade. The drive to the Dalai Lama's residence was about 3/4 of an hour. The streets had been closed to allow the Dalai Lama to go to the airport, and Tibetans, Indians, and a few tourists were lining the streets, hoping to get a glimpse of him and his special guest. I realized now why the Dalai Lama so rarely makes the pilgrimage to the airport. It is a major logistical operation that shuts down one of the main roads and impacts the whole city. We were here to discuss joy in the face of life's challenges, and everywhere in Dharamshala were reminders that this was a community that had been traumatized by oppression and exile. The town clings to winding hillside roads, and craft stalls hang over the edges of sheer cliffs. Like construction throughout India and so much of the developing world, building codes and security precautions were waved aside to make room for the exploding population. I wondered how these structures would fare in an earthquake, and feared that the whole city might be shaken off the back of these mountains like a leaf from a waking animal. The motorcade snaked up as the lines of the devout thickened, some burning incense and many others with mala beads draped around their prayerfully cupped hands. It is hard for non-Tibetans to understand how much the Dalai Lama means to the Tibetan people, and this exile community in particular. He is both the symbol of their national and political identity, and also the embodiment of their spiritual aspirations. To be the embodiment of the Bodhisattva of compassion means in many ways to be a Christ-like figure. I can only imagine how challenging it must be for the Dalai Lama to carry this responsibility while also trying to emphasize his being nothing special, just one of the 7 billion people. The streets narrowed, and I wondered how our speeding cars could possibly pass through the throng of people, but we seemed to slow only for the occasional sacred cow that meandered into the street, perhaps also to get a better glimpse of the two holy men. I wondered if the careening pace was due to security concerns or a desire to reopen the roads, but I guessed more likely the former. This city, like all of India's cities, is formed through the constant friction of tectonic layers of culture, shifting and jostling with each other in a vibrant and sometimes uneasy display of devotion and identity. The Tibetan Buddhist hilltop town of McLeod-Ganj, known also as Upper Dharamshala, is one more sedimentary level on top of the Indian Hindu city. Dharamshala, as it is pronounced in Hindi, means spiritual dwelling, combining the word dharma, spiritual teaching, with shala, which is a dwelling, and the whole name means pilgrim's lodge or rest house. It is a fitting name for a city that is the site of so much pilgrimage today. We hurried through the simple metal gates of the Dalai Lama's complex, where his offices and private residence are located. We arrived at a semicircular driveway surrounding a bed bursting with spring flowers. I had visited Dharamshala in January to meet with the Dalai Lama's office to plan this trip. At the time, the whole town was shrouded in clouds and freezing cold, but now the sun was shining brightly, the flowers all the more eager to bloom, as they always seem to be in the brief growing season at higher altitudes, their lives cut short every day, seemingly more urgent and appreciated. As the beginning of the dialogues grew closer, I realized I was becoming increasingly nervous. but I also knew that I was not the only one. On one of our planning calls for the trip, I had been touched by the Archbishop's honest expression of concern about crossing with the Dalai Lama. "He is much more cerebral," he had said, referring to the Dalai Lama's great love of debate, intellectual inquiry, and scientific exploration. "I am more instinctual," he had said, and I remembered him saying that deep visceral knowing and prayerful surrender had guided all of the major turning points in his life and his mission in the struggle to end apartheid. I guess even great spiritual leaders get nervous when they are journeying into the unknown. After a day of rest for the Archbishop, we would begin the dialogues on the nature of true joy.